Okay, hello everybody and welcome. I see we have quite a few participants already, so I think we will get started. My name is Øystein Moseng. I am Chief Product Officer with Highcharts. I'm happy to welcome all of you to this webinar. Thanks for taking the time. And we're here today because we are going to introduce you all to a new product that I myself am quite excited about, and I hope that it's going to be able to save you some time in your development teams as well. So let's see, the plan for today is we're very shortly going to hear from my colleague Stian. He is going to take us through some of the features of this product, talk a little bit about how you can make that product work for you and your use case. And then we are going to round it off with about a 10-minute Q&A session at the end. So feel free to use the Q&A feature during the webinar, ask any questions you may have. Note that that's the Q&A feature and not the chat. I believe that's turned off. But then we'll also make sure we send out a recording afterwards. We'll make sure we send out some resources. And we'll also try to get to any other questions that we didn't in the webinar in an email afterwards. We have a couple of salespeople on hand as well who I believe will try to answer any not too technical questions in writing if there's anything sales related as we go. But with that, if you're a long-time Highcharts user, you are probably aware that we brought out Highcharts dashboards a couple of years back. And the thinking behind that is we wanted to save developers time who were building dashboards, especially on the front end. So if you're managing different data sources, you're massaging them for different places on the front end, you're syncing them up, that's where we wanted to step in and help out. Also for common dashboarding scenarios where you would want the end user to be able to edit the dashboard, that's also somewhere where we thought we could help out. And as part of that work, we also developed some components for Highcharts dashboards so that people wouldn't have to go to third-party vendors for the basic things that we think pretty much always will be included in a dashboard. And one of those components is a grid. And the thinking behind this is that we wanted these components to play well together in Highcharts dashboards. We wanted to keep performance front on mind, so things would flow together nicely and also be quick to implement. We're also quite cognizant that we build things from scratch, so we try to keep dependencies as lightweight as possible, as low as possible. But it turns out the grid component in Highcharts dashboards is quite popular. We see that a lot of our customers appreciate reducing the number of dependencies. They may not need the full functionality of Highcharts dashboards, all of the power that comes with that, but they still would like access to our grid component. So we've given our grid some, I think we can say, extra attention lately. It's received pretty much a complete rewrite, and we're quite happy with it, actually, as it stands now for being something that covers the most common use cases without having to go to custom. But then if you have something more custom, it can step out of your way and let you do your thing. But we decided then that we would take the essential features of our grid component in Highcharts dashboards. We'll split it out into its own lightweight product, Highcharts Grid Lite, which is what we want to introduce you to today. And that's the most essential functionality from the dashboard component in sort of the lightweight package. So even if you don't need the full power from dashboards, you can still benefit from the grid component. And excitingly and importantly, we have decided to give it away for free. And I should clarify that this is still a product that is completely maintained by us. It's a professional tool. It's still built from the same code base as the full grid from dashboards, but we're not going to charge for it. And this is not a temporary giveaway or an April Fool's joke, as I think our social media team has made clear. But there are no plans for making Grid Lite a paid product. in the future. What we're hoping though is that this gets more people to try it out, gets us more feedback, and hopefully then allows us to improve all of our products and also adds value to all of our products. If there is demand for it, we may split out the full grid component as well from Highcharts dashboards, not just the essentials. And that could be a standalone paid product, but Grid Lite would remain free. So with that, I want to hand it over to Stian to take us through Grid Lite and show it off a bit, show us why it's useful.
Thank you. I'm Stian Totland. I'm the product manager of dashboards and grid. And I think Øystein have said it all. I just want to sort of iterate a little bit on what he said, just so that that's clear. We have Grid Lite now out for free, and we also have the version of Grid in dashboards that have some added more advanced functionality. And we will continue to actively develop both versions, and it remains to be seen what functionality gets put in what version. But both versions will be actively developed, and of course, big new functionality will most likely go into the dashboards version. But we'll of course continue to improve and enhance the existing functionality in the light version, and of course fix bugs and have attention to security and etc. etc. So let's just dive in. What I'm planning for today is basically a quick overview, a quick walkthrough of some of the functionality in Highcharts Grid Lite. And I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. Let's not fiddle around with that. So let's fiddle around in JS Fiddle instead. I will not do any actual programming. I will basically only tweak the configuration of the grid. So I think everybody, regardless of programming level, should be able to follow along. And I will touch on some aspects and functionality of the grid today. Basically, how you initialize it, the very basic setup of how you can get the grid up and running. I will talk about theming using CSS custom properties. I will talk about simple string formatting and also some more advanced string formatting using custom HTML and CSS in the grid's cells. I will talk a little bit about how to configure the header. I will talk about row virtualization and performance. That's a very important aspect of grids. I will, of course, talk about accessibility. I will mention React and Angular and tell a little bit about our plans there. And I will briefly touch and sort of tease some of the things that are in the dashboards version. So without further ado, if we have a grid that looks something like this. So the plan today is basically to put up a second grid and tweak and tune it so it looks like the one we have here. And it's a pretty simple one. It has some columns, some content, some hover styles, a scroll bar, of course, and it has some data. So if you look at the data first, this is basically the format that the grid accepts. It's an object with key values, where the key is the column name or ID of the column, and the value is an array of values. Now, if you can see, no, let's just close this one. And we can start off by simply doing this. And this is basically the bare minimum configuration you need to initialize a grid on the page. And as you can see, it doesn't resemble the one below, but we will tweak and tune stuff so that it does. So basically what happens when you do this, it basically lists out all the key value pairs in this object, where the key is the column header and the array of values is basically the values in the cells. Now this is sort of like a proper ID, but you could also use, for example, a string. And you can see that the header changes to the string. So if your data is properly formatted and ordered, this is basically all you need to produce a very basic grid. Now I need to reference this ID later on, so I will put it back in a more simple form. Okay. So this data table thing, this API option called data table, what it does, it basically initiates an instance of a data table class that is within the grid. And I won't go into the details of that class because that's beyond the scope of this webinar, but it's basically a structured representation of data consisting of columns and rows. So it's sort of the backend representation of the front-end grid representation. And that class offers a bunch of getter and setter methods for adding and removing and manipulating columns and rows and specific cells. So you can basically later on, you can use that class and the getter and setter methods to manipulate the data in this employee data object. So it could be some signal, perhaps a WebSocket push or something could trigger that you want to update something, and you can also use, and then you can use an update method in the grid to update and refresh the data in the grid. So that's enough about the data table. So we have this grid, and as you can see, this table shows the entire grid, and that's because we have basically no styling for it. So I can continue by basically adding a small piece of CSS, and it gets a new height. And this our grid ID, if you look at the HTML, this is the element that the grid is rendered into. And what you need to include as well, of course, is basically this JS file and this CSS file. And we have the CSS. I'm going to take this back, sorry. Okay, so then we can start basically by doing some theming. And in the grid, we have, as you can see from the grid, it has a default theme that comes out of the box. But you can add your own themes by basically specifying, sorry, I need to do it like that. It went a little bit too fast. Sorry, I will do it manually. Hang on. Hang on. Can you see the error in here? I can't. It's this one. Yes. So basically, if I pass in an empty string, you will receive a completely blank slate, no styling whatsoever. So we can start from scratch styling this table using CSS custom properties. So I will start by adding some CSS in the CSS pane. This is basically a class that says our theme, and I will use that one in this object. I guess it was. and we are getting closer to what we want to achieve. So if we look at the CSS, these custom properties comes out of the box along with the grid, and there are quite a lot of them, but they are quite easy to grasp because these are the global ones that have this basic HCG prefix, and the next part of the variable is basically a CSS property. So whatever you define just using this prefix and the CSS property are global settings for the entire grid, including headers and body and caption and etc., etc., etc. And then you can override those by basically specifying, in addition to the prefix, you can have a section element of it. In this case, header. So if I add header to the prefix and then the CSS property, you can see that the header gets a darker green background and white text. And this gets inherited throughout the grid. And I can continue. As you see now, we are quite close to this one, but we miss the hover styles. So in addition to this section, we also have a state prefix that looks like this. Let me just fix this for a second. And you can now see that we have the section, which is the cell, and we have a state that says hovered, and then we have the CSS property. So basically this one says on cell when hovered, column background should be something else. And as you see, you have one background for color, one for row, and a slightly darker one for the cell in the middle. And why do we have these? Why can't you just use plain CSS to style your table with plain CSS overrides? Well, you can if that's what you prefer, but it's not something we recommend, and that's for various reasons. And the main reason is that we want to preserve backwards compatibility when we do upgrades. But when we release new versions and add functionality and improve on the current functionality, we will most likely end up changing some markup and some CSS. And if you use these variables, we will go to great lengths not to introduce break-in changes. If you use your own custom CSS overrides, it might break because we change stuff. So that's basically for styling the overall complete table or grid, we highly recommend using these custom properties. But when it comes to styling the content within the cells, and I'll get back to that later, you can use your own custom markup. And in that case, you need to use your own custom CSS as well. And you can use whatever framework, whether it's Tailwind or something else, or just vanilla CSS. Style the content in the cells however you like. But for the overall styling of the table, we highly recommend using these custom properties. There is one thing that I would like to fix. If you see in this, our template table, the content is cut off by an ellipsis. And the way to do that is basically to add something in the rendering object. We basically add something called we add a rows object. And you can now see that we also have the ellipsis in this. So now it looks pretty much the same style-wise. We have some stuff to do when it comes to formatting. And this rendering API option is basically, it contains various options when it comes to the rendering of the table. And I'll get back to some of those elements later on. Okay. And I'll also add a caption element. Let's put that up here. I will fix this so that it's more readable. Sorry about that. Okay. Now you can see that we have also the caption for the table, and you can use HTML in the caption. Now you can see in this table there are fewer rows. They have different titles. They have different formatting. So now we'll dive into how you can format the cells in different ways in the table. So basically what you can do, we have a columns API object that I can do like that and save. And now you see that the title have changed to a title with a capital T instead of this job title ID. And basically you define the ID of the columns, and then you have a header object and a format, and you can put, and you also have class name and different stuff in here. But for now, let's just change the title of this header. That's the simple one, and we can go a little bit further by looking at this one. In this ID column, we have checkboxes, and I can add that one. And now we see we have checkboxes here as well. And we basically say we target the ID column. In this case, we say that the header should be empty. There is no header in here. We add a class name to the cell to center it, and these are one of the class names that follows along with the library, or you can do your own, but in this case it basically just centers the content. And for format, instead of the ID that we saw, we insert an input of type checkbox with the value of the cell. This one. So this now renders as a checkbox with a value, and the value is the ID. And we can go a little bit further, and we can do some thing. We can, for example, you can see in this one, we have name, first name, last name. In this one, we have first name, last name, Alice Smith, 2 columns. So we can add another one that says ID, and I messed it up. It's supposed to go here. We now see that this column have changed to contain both first name and last name. And that is basically that we fetches the data from the row called last name and inject it into the current row. And this row data first name is basically the same as value. So I can also use the transform here as value, and it's the same. Now I still have the last name column, so I can use another option. Fine, I target the last name column and says enabled equals false. And you can now see that the last name column have disappeared. So we can basically shape both the content of the cells and the number of rows, etc., using this columns array of objects. Now let's do one more. As you see here, we use this is basically templating in a sort of it's I've forgotten what it's called, but it's inspired by some quite old JS templating engine. I can't remember what it's called.
Handlebars, isn't it?
Handlebars. It's handlebars. Yes. So it looks quite a lot like handlebars. So I can basically also do this. If we look at the email column, here it's clickable emails, and instead of the blank field, we have a not available. And as in handlebars, we can use expressions, and we can use conditional blocks as well. I won't go into the details, but the ones of you who have used Highcharts Core, the charting library, the same that you use there is also available in Highcharts Grid. So it's all documented, but I won't spend time looking at that now. And also, just the last one, we can change this this number, the salary column, and format that as a number, and it's like this. Now, these format API options basically returns a string. It's valid. It's valid JSON. It's serializable. It's secure. But if you need some more fancy logic to your formatting, if you need to involve, you can do a lot of stuff with nested conditional blocks. But if you need to do some more fancy stuff, you can also use a callback function, which I will quickly paste in. This. And you now see that we have these arrows in this one. And let me quickly just add the CSS for this as well. And here we have some custom markup and custom CSS, as I talked about earlier. Like that is basically just the CSS for those colors, and it gets updated. And as you see in this one, don't look at the coding. I'm no developer, but it's basically just to demo that you can do whatever you like in here. Basically, we look at the value in this column, and we use the value in this column compared to the value in this column, and we format these numbers based on that. And just shows that you can do calculations based on values from the entire grid, and you can also pick values from other rows and include them in the logic. So it's quite versatile, and you can pretty much do whatever you like. Let me have a sneak peek at the agenda. Okay, there are some stuff. If we look at the header, you can see that this header is grouped, and you can also see that the salary is on a different place. It's not the same order. So we can use a header object to configure the header. Now you can configure a lot of stuff basically just using this columns object, basically hiding and showing columns, but the order of these objects doesn't matter. If you want to change the order or exclude a lot of columns, it's easier to use a header object. And we can have a quick look at that. If I first take a small example, we can put it in here. So we just follow the flow. You can see now that I define a header, and that's basically an array of the column IDs. And here I say that I would like to include the ID, that's this one. I would like to include first name, and if you remember, that's actually this one that we merged with the last name thing and changed the title or the header. And I also include last name, but that doesn't show. And that's because whatever you do in columns takes precedence of what you do in header. So columns is the most important thing, and you can override stuff in header from columns. But we're not quite there. And you can also say that if you want to change the order, if I want to move ID as the second one, you basically fix the order in here. And if basically, let me first just fix this and add an extra thing. If I continue on this header array, we now have something that looks almost, well, it looks like the one below. Basically, you can either just define the IDs to include whatever you have defined down here, or you can use the header to also do some formatting. Basically, what we do here in this object, we says format, and this basically makes a new row with column span on it. And in that row, we put some additional columns, basically the job title and the current performance, and this inherits from columns. And we haven't defined the format for salary down in column, but you can do it up here. But instead of just this string, the ID, you can enter in an object, define what ID to use in this object, and you can also format stuff up here. So you can use either or. Basically, if you have a data set that is 100 columns and you only want to show 5 of them, you could easily do that up here. You wouldn't want to list every single column down here and put enabled false on them. So you can do some rough formatting in the header, and you can fine-tune it in columns, or the other way around. It's up to you and your specific use case. Okay, let's talk a little bit about virtualization and performance. That's an important subject. One important thing when it comes to grids is row virtualization, and I think the easiest way to explain it is by looking at a picture from the documentation. Basically, if you have a grid with 100,000 rows, we don't render 100,000 rows in the browser because it would, in many cases, run out of memory, and you would experience lots of strange behavior. So basically what we do, we render only the visible rows in the table. The green one here is the actual grid. And we, in addition to that, we render a buffer on top of it and on the bottom. And then as you scroll the grid, we add or remove from this buffer. So I see we are basically running a little bit out of time, but I can quickly show one aspect. If now we have a table, if I remove the height, this one, you will see that the table renders, it shows the every single data set in every single row in the data set upon until a point, which is the virtualization threshold. So I can take, let me just copy something. There are some options that you can configure in the rendering. Okay. So basically, this is now, we show the complete table. And if I inspect this, I can quickly do that. you can basically see that this is a regular table. There is no fancy stuff here, no absolute positions or nothing. It's basically a plain table, and that's what we need. We don't need all those fancy calculations for virtualizing it if you want to show a small table containing. So it's kind of we are adding to the complexity as needed. In this case, we don't need it. If I reintroduce the heights and save, it's still not a virtual table, still no virtual rows in here because the virtualization threshold, I think it's by default it's 50, and we haven't hit that one yet. So if I look at the table now, it's still quite simple. The only difference, and that is because basically a table is not very good at having overflow on T-body. We basically have to style the widths for the columns, and that's the only thing we have added to it. But if I reduce the virtualization threshold and say, for example, it needs to start with virtualization at 4. Now the table is virtual, and if you inspect, you can see on the TRs, we have this transform translate Y, and that's basically animating in and out the rows of the table. So we don't add this unless we need to. You can configure this. I won't go into the details of this as of now. You can configure this to fit whatever suits your specific use case, and it's sort of a balance between loading times to first paint of the table versus performance when it comes to scrolling and etc. etc. And there's a different balance to be struck in every different use case depending on what you need. So that's basically row virtualization. I will talk a little bit about accessibility. As you saw when I inspected the code, let me remove this. This is an HTML table. It's not a series of divs that mimics a table by using ARIA attributes. It's a semantically correct table, and that in itself provides some accessibility for screen readers. Most screen readers do a good job of interpreting a standard HTML table, and we don't need to introduce extra ARIA labels and of course to mimic a table using divs. So that in itself, and that's it's kind of important for us, and we'll see how long we can sort of stretch that before we need to offer maybe a div variant of this because of additional functionality. But in addition to it being actually a table, we use all the needed ARIA attributes out of the box. And also if I swap to, let me swap to another cell. Let's look at, this one covers my, there we are. This is a sample from our demo pages that I would recommend you to have a look at afterwards. It basically highlights the different accessibility options that you can configure, and also announcers, basically meaning if you do sorting, etc., etc. If you sort the table, I will not try to use a screen reader in this presentation because that's seldom very good on these online video things. But you can change the language and the wording for what is announced when you do sorting. You can change what's announced when you do cell editing, for example, and some other stuff. And this has been tested. We have a cooperation with the Blind Institute of Technology, And we have tested this with disabled people, and it's pretty good. And we will continue to work on this. Accessibility, of course, is very important to Highsoft and on all of our products. So let's return to the JS Fiddle. When it comes to React and Angular, it's definitely something that we are looking at. We wanted to get this out in the market quickly and as soon as possible to start gathering some user feedback. And we basically decided that we want to do this as a plain JavaScript library first, because that can be implemented by everybody. Not everybody can use React components, for example. It's something new and it might bloat the application if you don't use React before. But everybody can implement this in React or Angular or whatnot. And it's documented in the documentation how you can use this JavaScript library in your React or Angular or Vue application, etc. Now, we definitely are looking at providing a proper React component, and it's something that will come at some stage. But as of now, we have the JavaScript version, and it can be used in React. So have a look at the documentation afterwards. I see we're running out of time, so I will quickly touch upon the aspect of events. We introduced these checkboxes quite early, but what do we need them for? One use case could be, for example, that you could check some cells. Let's look at these people with their performance score. This is maybe an HR table or something, and let's look at Evan Jones. Compared to last year, he is scoring pretty bad, and also Bob Johnson. It could be the salary, but I doubt it. And I have a secret button down here, and you can use the checkboxes to basically pick data and show, for example, a chart. And you can see on Evans that he has performed pretty good over the years and dropped suddenly. So it's most likely his salary. Bummer. This is one way, but to be able to achieve this, you can do this with the Lite version, but it's definitely easier, safer, and less hacky to do it with the dashboard version, because the dashboard version have different events that you can listen to, and such as click events and change values and sorting events and etc. 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 So this is quite possible in the Lite version. This is the Lite version, but it's easier in the Pro version. I will just quickly skip to, I have down below here, I have a roadmap. Just to talk a little bit about what the next steps are for DataGrid. I think the thing we are currently working on that is pretty close to being released is input validation, because in the dashboards version, if I switch my tab again, it's possible to click in the cells and you can edit values. And here we can see we use an event to basically log what is changed. And of course, you can use this data, post them to server or whatnot. But as of today, it's basically a text field, and you have to do any validation yourself. So we are currently working on input validation out of the box, so that we can provide some helper method for you to validate the actual input, so that you don't store malformed data. We are also looking at different input mechanisms in addition to that text input. Could be drop downs, could be booleans, checkboxes, etc. etc. We are of course looking at filtering, searching, that will come quite soon. There is pagination, is something that we are looking at. You can do pagination on the Gridlite library as of today, but it's something you have to write yourself. But we will provide something out of the box on that one. We are looking at sparklines in cells. Now, sparklines is possible today by basically implementing charts from the core library. I can quickly show you a quick demo of that. This is basically, it's a grid out of the box. This is just some random data being inserted. And in this after set value event, for those of you who know Highcharts, this is basically just a very basic Highcharts config. And as you can see, we disable a lot of stuff to produce this clean, simple line. And we have forgotten to disable the tooltip. But it's a Highchart core chart, and as you can see on performance, it's snappy and it works. But we are looking at even slicker sparklines that you can insert, maybe using WebGPU or something. It's just a sort of a small subset of everything that's in the core library that you can trigger without inserting this core code snippet to make it easier. I think we have to call it a day and start the Q&A session if there are any. Let me just stop sharing.
Yes, actually, I don't see any questions yet, so you've been extremely clear in your presentation, Stian.
Oh, I doubt it, but okay.
Well, this would be a good time then to ask questions if anybody has something they are wondering about, but
well,
if not,
I think it was maybe clear enough, but I think we will most likely tomorrow we will send out a follow-up email to all those who attended, containing a recording and some resources, and also please, and most likely my contact information. So please reach out if you have any questions whatsoever, and I will do my best to answer.
now we actually did get some questions. So while you were talking, so first one is if we're planning on any export functionality like in Highcharts.
Yes, we are. Basically, there are two types of exports. It's the CSV Excel kind of exports that we are looking into, and we also have on the table currently investigating to do a PDF export, and also it's not a moon landing to do PNG or JPEG in the browser. So it's definitely something that we are looking into and will most likely provide at some stage.
Very good. I see somebody's raising their hand. I'm not sure we're enabling audio here, so if you're able to ask it through the Q&A in writing, that'd be perfect. Let's see. So next is roadmap for 2025 specifically. Do you want to talk about the timeframes a little bit?
Yes, I can. I think as I said, next up is input validation and those different input mechanisms in addition to the simple input element. So I think that's the first thing that will come, and that will come quite soon. And next up after that, I think is it's an easier way to include sparklines without including that configuration from core. It would basically be a small subset maybe of the core charts that is stripped down and that you can easily inject into the cells. So I think that's the two big ones that coming quite soon. And then we have pagination and searching filtering after that. I'm kind of reluctant to provide any specific dates or weeks or quarters for that, but I don't think we are very far off.
We can also probably take this time to mention that, of course, you as customers and users would be able to influence the roadmap quite heavily, where we try to be quite customer driven. So if something's asked for a lot, we'll listen.
Definitely.
And then one person is saying, hello guys, super excited for this product. Now using data table, looking to replace and asking about timeframes. When can we see this product release? And good news to you is that it's already released, I suppose.
It is. It's available. You can. I'm not quite sure if we have. We have. You can go to highcharts.com and you can go into the documentation, and you can find the documentation and installation, download instructions, etc. there. So you can start using it today.
We'll send out some links, of course, with the webinar as well. And here also another question: what is the best way to get started? And I suppose we'll send that out. But anything in addition you'd like to add to that, Stian, on getting started?
No, I think basically I'll maybe go to the demo section on highcharts.com, find some grid demos. There are a couple there, and click the JS Fiddle link, and you can basically start playing around with it in the browser without installing or downloading anything, and just to get a feel of it and try it out that way. I guess that's the easiest way to get started. And then you can, of course, download or linked to JS Deliver and start doing it locally.
Yeah, great. Yep, and another person was asking about export. Yeah, and for anyone in need of these features, we'd love to hear more about your use case as well, to find out exactly what kind of exporting needs you have.
Yeah.
If this is server side report generation, or if it's more of a client side thing, for example. One person here is saying, may have missed it, but are the tables sortable by default by clicking column headers?
Yes, they are. By default, they are sortable, all the columns, but you can define either globally to turn it off, or you can define on column level what columns should be sortable or not. And you can also define the initial sort. So if you want the table to be rendered sorted initially by one column, either ascending or descending, you can configure that in the configuration. Yes, I don't see these questions, so it's a good thing you read them out for me.
I can just make stuff up then.
Yeah.
And yeah, this person is coming back saying, thanks, super happy to see you guys enter the table / grid market now using Highcharts Core and loving the quality. That's great to hear, and please help keep us honest on that. Give us feedback. We would love to keep making it better. We use Highcharts stock charts. Any integration with those charts, or is this a separate new item when the table and chart are of the same data?
This is definitely a separate item, but both stock and core and grid uses that data table class that I talked about initially. So all the products, both core and stock and grid, consumes data in the same format, and you can use the same data source for both stock and grid. And you basically, if you manipulate the data source, it will be reflected in both the stock chart and the grid, depending on how you instrument it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know
quite.
if that was an answer to anything, but
I think it's an answer. Well, speaking for this person now,
yeah,
but it's quite a new thing in Highcharts Stock and Highcharts Core standalone that you could use these data table data formats. Otherwise, Highcharts dashboards is also
yeah,
perhaps a good place to look if you're looking at syncing up these components. That's one of the things it's built for, and also in terms of performance, making sure things are synced up at the right time.
yeah.
And if you wanted to make subtle changes to the presentation, depending on the components and such, then there's a lot of functionality there in Dash. I don't see any more questions, so perhaps this is a good time to round it off. Again, we'll send out the recording, we'll send out some resources, good places to start. And then if there were any questions we didn't get to, we'll try to make sure we go through all of this um, before sending that out so we can catch any last minute questions here as well. But of course, reach out to us at any point. We're more than happy to talk about any of this.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I will end the meeting then, but have a great rest of your Tuesday, and thanks for taking the time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.